Hello, my name is Rob Schenk. Welcome to my Literature Circle video project. Thanks for watching. We're going to go straight into it. So the book that I chose for this was Words and Actions, Teaching Languages Through the Lens of Social Justice by Cassandra Glynn, Pamela Wesely, and Beth Wassell. It's the second edition. It's published in 2018. For context, Glynn's work focuses around experiences of marginalized and underrepresented students in world language classes and teachers' critical approaches to teaching language and culture. Wesley's work deals with K-12 world language education in the United States, and Wassell focuses on critical and sociocultural frameworks to examine individuals' agency in reshaping teaching and teaching education structures in preschool through 12th grade settings. I think the backgrounds of these authors matter because they kind of combine their experiences together to create a literal guide to understanding and implementing culturally responsive teaching and culturally sustaining pedagogy in a world language classroom. For clarity, world language in this book is framed as an additional language taught at the middle, high, or collegiate level. It includes Spanish, French, Mandarin Chinese, Arabic, and more. We're going to jump right in here with focusing on one of the main themes of the book, which is the discussion of the cultural frameworks of pedagogy. So one of the biggest pedagogical practices that this book focuses on is culturally responsive teaching, pedagogy that recognizes the importance of including students' cultural references in all aspects of learning. This pedagogy is the foundation for this book and for their strategy in integrating social justice issues into world language education. This is clearly demonstrated through the book's focus and use of teachers' frame of reference when it comes to teaching world languages, and in the book's concept of curriculum design as the creation of discourse communities that encourage discussion. So first, we're going to talk about one of the book's main themes, which is frames of reference. So a broader term for frames of reference is a broader term that combines an individual's identity and life experiences. In essence, our frames of reference as teachers inform how we teach students and how students understand and connect to teachers. Informed by our ethnicity, culture, sexuality, socioeconomic status, geographic location, and more. These frames of reference form the curricular theory that culturally responsive teaching uses in this book. The book posits that by understanding a student's frame of reference, a teacher can adapt and adjust to the student's cultural experience and use this as a foundation for exploring issues of equity, marginalization, and cultural avenues regarding world language, world cultural practices, and more. However, these frames of reference are balanced by a teacher's apprenticeship of observation. The apprenticeship of observation is the tendency for teachers to instruct students in the way they themselves were taught. So for example, a teacher with a predominantly Eurocentric, white point of view may overlook key aspects of cultural instruction in a world language class, which in turn perpetuates a white Eurocentric point of view and mode of thinking in the teacher students. This concept, coined by Lordy in 1975, is one of the main concepts that the book tries to deconstruct. And one of the methods that Glynn, Wassely, and Wassell used to deconstruct this apprenticeship of observation that kind of nests inside a student's frame of reference. I think that's important to point out, is that like the concept of apprenticeship of observation is balanced by a student's frame of reference, but they're kind of two halves of the same whole. They're not like two separate parts. But one of the ways to kind of address this apprenticeship of observation is through the creation of discourse communities. Discourse communities are means to build learning communities in the classroom that emphasize and capitalize on students' unique perspectives in order to create a foundation of cultural learning and awareness that can then be used as a bridge for connecting students' experiences to experiences of students in different cultures. These interpersonal conversations don't just nurture student relationships and build community. The book posits that creating discourse communities is actually a key aspect of resisting and dismantling the banking model of education that Freire discusses in Pedagogy of the Oppressed. So to do this, the book asks teachers to not only teach cultural and critical thinking skills, what would be termed as authentic thought based on reality, as Freire might say, but to help students become agents of their own learning, in the words of Sonia Nieto. and thereby creating the teacher-student, student-teacher relationship where both teachers and students become jointly responsible for a process in which all grow, again, according to Freire. Furthermore, these discourse communities can serve as a catalyst, in the words of Bell Hooks, to draw students into the learning process. And the creation of these discourse communities feeds directly into the curriculum design this book uses. So this book uses backwards curriculum design. Words and Actions focuses on many ways discourse communities can be used to engage with learning world language through a social justice lens. But one of the most prominent methods it discusses is project-based learning curricula. And again, this is all kind of relating to culturally responsive teaching as a pedagogy. So project-based learning curricula, or PBL, engages students over a long period of time in student-centered collaborative work on a unified project that seeks to answer a set of complex questions. And so throughout almost every lesson plan that's outlined in this book, project-based learning can be found largely because, in my opinion, and in kind of how the book frames the issue, project-based learning curricula allows students to focus on social justice issues in a concrete way that also allows for students' frames of reference to be engaged with. So the 6 criteria for strong project-based learning are intellectual challenge and accomplishment, authenticity, public product, collaboration, project management, and reflection. So there's 6 of them. I wanted to outline these 6 criteria because of its direct correlation to social justice frameworks in teaching. For example, in one of the articles we read for 630, Reclaiming Our Queendom, Black Feminist Pedagogy and Identity Formation of African American Girls by Monique Lane. Lane's creation of Black Girls United and the use of critical feminist literature, multiplicity of texts, collectivity, and an emphasis on ethics of care is a concrete adaptation of project-based learning and how it can be used for social justice education. So in Lane's case, her creation of the group and use of texts combined with the politicized ethic of care hits the intellectual challenge and authenticity components of PBL. The queen shirts that Lane created can be seen as public product in that they represent the students' work and provide a means for engaging in that work both in and outside of school. The collaboration component is seen in the way that the girls in Black Girls United built community through connection, and the project management and reflection components are demonstrated in the group's continual resistance, rejection, and recontextualization of a school system that frequently and systematically commits and perpetuates acts of violence, emotionally and physically, against African American female students. So using Lane as a case study in this case for the effectiveness of project-based learning curricula affirms and actually upholds Words and Actions' focus on using it as a method for teaching world languages, and is also direct evidence for the importance and effectiveness of discourse communities as well. Because Black Girls United could definitely be considered a discourse community. Words and Actions, use of culturally responsive pedagogy, seen in the use and reliance on frames of reference, discourse communities, and project-based learning curricula, kind of overall creates a really great range of social justice-oriented teaching tools that can be implemented in a world language classroom for positive effect, and draw from and connects to social transformation curriculum as well as student-centered curriculum, as I in the book have demonstrated through Freire and through Hooks, Sonia Nieto, and Monique Lane, as I've just described. So all these strategies, kind of pulling back a bit on our lens of examination, all these strategies are used in this book with regards to the world readiness standards for learning languages, which is kind of like also the final aspect of this work I'm going to discuss. The 5 standards for the world readiness standards for learning languages are communication, cultures, connections, comparisons, and communities. They're all C's. There's a lot of like lists in this book of like of aspects of different standards and conventions. But the world readiness standards for learning languages can be seen as a sort of rubric by which to measure and assess how the social justice oriented tools described in this book accurately connect with and reinforce world language learning standards. So, for example, the use of frames of reference has a direct link with the connections piece of the world readiness standards for learning languages. Through interacting with other students' frames of reference, learners can build, reinforce, and expand their knowledge of other disciplines while using the language to develop critical thinking and creative problem solving. That is the direct text from that aspect of the world readiness standards for learning languages. In this way, the standards are used to ensure that the tools being used to teach world languages are actually social justice oriented, versus teaching a world language from a Western-centric point of view as other. I want to take a moment to highlight this distinction because I think it's really important. Because it's a subtle difference, but it makes a big deal. So the difference between these two teaching viewpoints can also lead to microaggressions and tokenism, which is why I think it's important to point out. So the world readiness standards that I just described ask to what extent world language is being taught from a social justice curricular perspective, whereas like dominant world language education standards ask to what extent world language is being taught from a disciplinary knowledge curricular perspective. And the disciplinary knowledge curricular perspective is the one that focuses on subject matter. So this focus on subject matter, though also engaging in like the semantic process of learning a language, leaves out that critical cultural component that not only enriches learning, as seen in discourse communities that I've described, but also enforces the learning of a world language as secondary to English. So it posits like a power complex where the English is the dominant language and the world language being learned is secondary. And this impacts the understanding and interaction with world language on its own terms, both culturally and linguistically. You can see this in lessons and learning strategies that place an overemphasis on comparing and contrasting students' experiences with experiences of students in a target culture being studied in a world language class. So cultofpedagogy.com has an article where they talk about how compare and contrast assignments have benefits for sure, but an over-reliance on this strategy can actually lead to a boxing of a culture into a set of holidays and just like a geographic location that prevents any focus on unique cultural experiences and dynamics that exist within that target language. And in addition, this technique can also force students to fit their own personal experiences and frames of reference into American-centered, English-oriented experiences that don't leave any room for cultural identity as resistance to dominant American ideology or cultural identity just as in and of itself. So that's kind of like the overall framework of the book, some of the themes that take place, and some of the connections that we can make to the text that we've read in 630. Taking a different avenue here and discussing my own personal thoughts on the book. I really enjoyed it. It's definitely an asset and a resource for teaching and understanding world language and socially just teaching. It is also a workbook. So I want to point out that every chapter has at least 2 or 3 points of reflection and discussion. And with questions for readers to work through, opportunities to draft lesson plans. It contains lesson planning examples, it contains templates, it's got frameworks in it. So overall, it really contains a panoply of resources. However, it did make the book a bit dry to read. That's just my value judgment on it. And because I did read this book by myself, as you can clearly see, there's no one next to me. I wasn't able to engage in some of the reflection points as interactively as if I'd been in a group setting, and so therefore I think I may have missed out on some of the interactive points of that book. If you were going to read it, I would say focusing on chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, and 8 would probably be the key aspects of the book. So chapters 1 through 4 provide like a really interesting overview of socially just teaching, the values of it, how to apply it to a world language classroom, and also examples of how to of just different applications of socially just teaching. And chapter 8 kind of takes pulls out and does like a macro focus on socially just teaching and world language in general, which is just interesting to read. I am also going to connect this to my personal experience. So I studied Mandarin Chinese as a world language for 2 years in middle school, 4 years in high school, and 2 years in college. And although I think that my professors did attempt to, and I should say successfully attempt to connect the Mandarin Chinese with the culture that was being studied in, I don't think it was social. It was like with a socially just lens on it. And so because of that, although I do remember a lot of the language, and I also remember a lot of key points of the culture, I think if it had a socially just lens on it, I probably would remember it more, just due to, as the book Words and Actions that we're discussing talks about, the creating of a discourse community would have greatly helped my personal understanding of the language. Engaging more in my personal frames of reference also would have helped. So overall, I think it's a really good book. It's definitely worth reading. I think it'd be more beneficial to read in a group, and I also think if you came to it like ready to like actively gather resources and teaching materials and lesson plans, I think this is the book for you. If you're looking for more of like a theoretical perspective on it, it touches on that, but it doesn't go as in depth. So that's my overview of words and actions teaching languages through the lens of social justice. Thank you so much for watching. Again, my name is Rob Schenk. I really appreciate you sticking through this 15-minute video with me, and hope you have a nice day. Thanks.